Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so thrilled that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, as always, USA Today bestselling author Hank Phillippi Ryan. I've written 15 going on 16 novels of suspense. My newest novel is One Wrong Word, which is now also out in paperback. And my brand new book coming up in September 9th, actually, we have a date, is called All This Could Be Yours, about a debut author with a blazing bestseller whose glamorous book tour gets sabotaged and destroyed by a stalker who's out to ruin her career and the family she had to leave back home. You will never look at book tours the same way after All This Could Be Yours. But enough about me and enough about my books. Let me tell you that today we are interviewing and chatting with the fabulous, the brilliant Carter Wilson, whose brand new book, Tell Me What You Did, is out January 28th. So you're hearing about it here first. This is amazing. We absolutely love this. I have to tell you all, welcome to all of you. Emily is here and Betty is here, who says, I'll put your pub date in my calendar. Thank you, Betty. And the fabulous Kathy Lanigan. And Deborah is here saying, hello, Carter and Hank. Happy Tuesday from Northwest Ohio. We welcome you. And Susie Baldwin is here from Seattle. The gang is arriving. Hi, Christine. Anyway, tell me what you did. Let me tell you what I thought about this book was, and I'll tell you the total truth about this. So I pick up this book and I open the book and I start reading and I start reading and I start reading and I start reading. And at some point I thought, this is so suspenseful. I don't know if I can keep reading this. It's so suspenseful. And then I thought, it's fine. Just keep going. It's just a book. So I could not put this down. It is absolutely total immersion storytelling. It's surprising and thought-provoking and incredibly written and unique and special, and you will not be able to put this down. Did I already say that? But it's true. Poorly. Hi, Shannon Hansen. Shanson, you will not be able to put this down. It is top-notch storytelling and top-notch suspense. I mean, you will absolutely love it. Oh my goodness. Vicki Gregory says, Carter is a new author to me. Happy to meet you. Let me tell you one more thing about Tell Me What You Did, and I will tell you what Lisa Gardner had to say about it. Lisa Gardner, the queen of us all, says, a brilliant thriller. I didn't just read this book. I devoured it in an adrenaline-fueled frenzy. What did I tell you? Right. Thank you. See, it's actually on the screen, those very words. Thank you, Margaret. It's a book just like that. Carter, welcome, first of all. I'm talking. Welcome. And what did you think when you saw Lisa Gardner's quote?
Well, thanks, Hank. And first of all, what a pleasure to talk to you again. I always love spending time with you. So this is a thrill for me. And yeah, Lisa is fantastic. I've gotten to know her a little bit. I interviewed her on my podcast, and I had actually reached out and asked if she could be my in-conversation partner for an event coming up. She couldn't, but she said, hey, can I read your book anyway? So I sent it to her, and just unsolicited, she gave me this blurb, and I'm like, this is amazing. So yeah, it's, as you know, whenever, a colleague gives you a tremendous blurb and it's from the heart, it means everything in the world.
Yeah, I think that Renee just said she loved Tell Me What You Did. That's exactly the book we're talking about. Tell Me What You Did by Carter Wilson. Mary says, intriguing. Going on Mount TBR, Mary, you're going to move it to the top. I promise you that you will. It's interesting, too, because having someone like Lisa Gardner read your book just out of the goodness of her heart, you didn't even ask her to, and then be so moved by it and so affected by it that she offered you her endorsement of the book. When you started as an author, did you think you would be in a place where Lisa Gardner was going to be asking for the book? You know what I mean? It seems so wild.
Yeah, you can't envision any of that kind of stuff happening. I mean, when you start as an author, and in particularly in my case, where I had no aspirations to be an author, I just started writing one day when I was in my early 30s. I don't, because I didn't know what I was doing, you can't even conceptualize finishing a book, much less it going out in the world and having people, much less famous people, read it. So it's always been kind of one step at a time for me. And then you start to look back after a while, like, some cool things have happened. This is pretty amazing. but you never think about it going forward.
It's so funny. I remember being at some event one day and someone came up to me and said, "What's your name?" or whatever it was. And I said, "Hank Phillippi Ryan." And she said, "Oh, are you the author?" And I thought, well, yes,
How many other Hank Phillippi Ryans do you know?
also like are you the author? I thought, well, yes, yes, I am an author. And there was this really amazing moment of realizing a new place in the world.
Right.
Some,
Totally. Because we all spend our time lacking self-confidence as writers. And this is one of the things I coach is just telling writers, call yourself a writer. Next time someone asks you what you do, say, I'm a writer. And that's really hard for a lot of people. Because we're all think we're not worthy. But you have to manifest it. You have to say, this is what I do. This is my intention. This is who I am in the world. And if you do that, good things happen.
Well, good things are obviously happening to you, and I know more will be happening for this fabulous book. Tell me what you did. There is so much love. Sherry Steuben says, "Carter, I love your books," with many exclamation marks. And Renee says it's an incredible thriller. Anyway, this is welcome, welcome, welcome. You can see, Carter, that we have the group that is constantly here who loves you and who cannot wait to hear more about this book. There is Sherry Steuben right there with her rainbow. If you are new to Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, this is the perfect day to come. Crime Time and A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic 5 years ago, amazingly, by the powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us reading and keep us chatting about books and keep us up to date on our favorite authors and maybe even meeting some new favorite authors. So I know that the fabulous Carter Wilson is the favorite already of some of you. And if he is not your favorite yet, because you're brand new, you cannot wait. I cannot wait to tell you about Carter and this book. Let me read you his bio so you know who he is very quickly, and then we'll get to talking about his book. Carter Wilson in Robinstall says, "I do enjoy Carter's books." Welcome, Robin. Very wise of you. Carter Wilson is the USA Today bestselling author of 10 critically acclaimed standalone psychological thrillers, as well as numerous short stories. He is an ITW Thriller Award finalist, a 5-time winner of the Colorado Book Award, and his works have been optioned for television and film. Additionally, he is the host of the Making It Up podcast, which we will talk about because you will love that, and founder of the Unbound Writer Company, which provides coaching services, writing retreats, and online classes. So if I forget to ask Carter about that, you all ask him in the Q&A about Making It Up and about Unbound Writer Company, because you will love to hear about it. So you have a podcast, Carter, now that we can talk about Tell Me What You Did. You have a podcast, and this is about a podcaster. Would you rather be on, well, which side of the microphone would you rather be on?
I like the host side. I love poking and probing and asking unexpected questions.
And I can tell that from the book, of course. Tell us what the book is about so we can just get some idea of what we're talking about here.
Sure. It follows the story of 30-year-old Poe Webb, who she hosts pretty much the top-ranked true crime podcast in the country called Tell Me What You Did. And the premise of the podcast is that people can call in anonymously and confess crimes. And if she believes them, then they have a conversation afterwards. And she's kind of doing this out of therapy in a sense, because she had witnessed her mother's murder when she was very young, and it's very traumatic for her. And nobody really knows about that. But then one day she gets a caller into the podcast, and he confesses that, in fact, he is her mother's killer. And so that sets off this whole string of events. Is this the real guy? She knows things about what happened to the real guy. She's got her own secrets. So it becomes a real psychological cat and mouse game between the guest and the host.
I mean, you all listened to that. Did you hear that? That is, what would you do if the person who said he murdered your mother showed up on your podcast and confessed to it? What do you do now? And that is what Poe Webb faces. The idea of a confession podcast, Carter, you think, why would somebody go on a podcast and confess a crime. What was your thought about that? And where did that idea come from?
Well, it's an interesting story because my friend Blake, he and I used to just kind of randomly exchange podcast recommendations to each other. And he told me one day about this podcast, which, forgive me, I don't know the name of it and I've never listened to it, but he said people can call this phone number and leave an apology. And then they play these apologies. And I thought, what if it was a confession instead of an apology? And so that's where it came from. And then as I started writing, I realized like, this is totally something people would do. Everyone is so starved for their 15 minutes of fame that even though they're assured anonymity, they're not really. You can still get caught and people would still take that risk just to be on the top ranked true crime podcast. So it kind of played into that a little bit as well.
It's interesting because you have Poe, who was a wonderful character, and we can talk about her more in a minute. She decides whether the confessor is telling the truth. What is it about? How does she know what true means? And why is that pivotal to the book?
It's important because, like I said, she's kind of working through her own issues. And so she's really looking to almost connect with the criminal mind because she's committed crimes in her own past. And that's part of the story. And it's almost like, a sisterhood, listening to people who have truly confessed things. And she also knows that it's a way for people to unload some of their guilt. And she also knows what makes entertaining podcasts. So even the ones that she thinks maybe are a little bit BS, she still might let on if they're a great story. But to her, she's seeing the whole thing as therapy more so than entertainment.
I mean, it's interesting, the complexity of that, isn't it? Because she feels guilty about what she may or may not have done in the past, and she knows what she did, and we come to learn about it more. The complexity of her guilt without real remorse and her connection with the criminal mind, as you said, the idea of the 15 minutes of fame and the idea of the anonymity, maybe, of a podcast where you wouldn't, as you were saying about the apology podcast, it's very difficult to do something face to face,
right?
Less difficult to tell it to a microphone.
Right. Exactly. And she does record video on it. And she says, I am going to delete this after 1 week unless I get a special request from the FBI or local law enforcement authorities. But most people are pretty much guaranteed of that just their voice will be heard. But still, people get arrested as a result.
Well, sure, because if you have enough clues about a certain crime, you would put 2 and 2 together and come up with the answer. So it's also that, and that's the tightrope. That's the knife, one of the tightropes of the story, one of the knife edges of the story is how the police will play into this or not. You give Poe, and we really like her. I mean, right off the bat, she has a sweet dad and a lovely dog. And I wonder if you gave her a murky, difficult, complicated past, balanced with that she loves her father and she loves her dog and she has a boyfriend. Is this part of the balance of allowing us to like her?
I mean, you know this, right? When you're writing a protagonist, it's hard to sit there and say, okay, I want her or him to be like this, therefore I must insert all these different things. You kind of write from the gut and saying, this is the fully fleshed person that I have in my mind. And to me, fully fleshed people are flawed. We're all flawed. There's nothing to me more boring than heroic heroes or villainous villains. Like, I want everybody to be murky because it allows us flawed humans to say, well, what would I do in this situation? So as I'm writing Poe, I'm not thinking like, okay, here she's got this bad past, but I'll give her a dog and that will win the readers over. I'm just like, yeah, I could totally see Poe having a dog because she wants companionship. She wants unconditional love. And a dog can do that. And that's how I would be, I think, were I in her situation. So, and as well as I do, you finish the book and like, I have no idea if people are going to like this person, if they're going to empathize with this person, if they're going to care what happens to him or her. You just write the best story you can and hope that it resonates. So some people might absolutely hate Poe and it's like, I don't care, but you just have no gauge of that until you start getting beta readers, agents, editors to kind of start digging in and give you feedback.
I mean, we're talking about Tell Me What You Did, about a podcaster who has a podcast show where people confess to their crimes. She has a crime of her own that she may or may not be confessing. Robin says we are all flawed humans, some more than others. It's interesting though, because she does have a dark and damaged past. Something happened to her that she could not control, and she's learning how to deal with that, and has made a decision about how to deal with that. I don't know how much you want to talk about that, so tell me as much as you want to. Tell us as much as you want to about the dark side of her life.
Yeah, well, I can say a decent amount. It's actually an interesting conversation we had with the editor about how much information do you reveal on the back cover copy, you know, and my editor decided to put what I would have maybe considered a little bit of a spoiler on there. So I'll go ahead and say it. But Poe, after she witnessed her mother's murder when when Poe was 13, 7 years has passed by and Poe tracks the killer down and murders him. So when she gets this confessing, podcast guest saying that he is actually the one who killed her mother and he seems familiar, she's completely confused. Is this actually the guy? If it's not the guy, how does he know all this information about me? And the crux of the story is that he wants her to confess what she did on her own show. And so she doesn't want her life ruined, but she's also being hunted in a way. And she's worried about her. She's worried about her father.
And of course, if she killed someone and it wasn't him, it wasn't the real murderer.
Right.
Who killed an innocent person.
Right. And there's obviously no statute of limitations. So, I mean, but I think, prison is the least of her worries. The moral, slip up is the big one. Like, I killed somebody and he was innocent. So she's got to figure that out. Who is this guy?
I love that, Carter. Prison is the least of her worries. Prison is the least of her worries. That is, and I can't believe you all that Carter and I have just told you this much about the book, and that's not even close to any of the whole thing about the book. It's just not even close. It's just the bare bones of something you'll know, like on page 1. And I love what you say about a reader thinking about what they would do in that kind of situation, because one of the things that I know you think is so important in a novel is that the readers understand why a character does what they do. And if their motivation feels right, then you might say, oh, that's terrible and that's scary, and I'm not sure if I would have done that, but I understand why she did that. How top of mind is that to you?
Yeah, that's pretty top of mind, but it all comes from me asking myself that question, right? Like, because I don't outline. So I'm writing a scene and I don't know what happens next. And so I'm constantly saying, what would I do? And you think about it and then you exaggerate that answer. You exaggerate it in a sense that still is believable. But I mean, there's certain things Poe does that I don't think I would have done that. But it's more interesting to see what she does, but it all comes from that place of empathy. So, and when you're a pantser, I think having a lot of empathy is huge in storytelling, because you're constantly checking in with your character and saying, I don't know what you're going to do next, but let's figure this out. And where are you at right now? What emotions are you feeling? And so as long as you're constantly tapping into that, it all starts to flow.
If you're lucky, right? If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
I know that you and I write similarly, although I don't think I've ever written anything that was quite as suspenseful as Tell Me What You Did. It's absolutely sensationally good. I wonder sometimes when I'm in a character's head and I'm writing and I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea who's behind the door, who's on the other end of the phone, or what will happen next. And sometimes I really feel like for that moment of writing, I am just channeling that person and their
100%.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. And I always think it's a little precious when people talk about, I just step back and the characters do what they do. And I just observe, obviously the author has all the agency, but that being said, you start to get in this person, especially if you're writing, tend to write first person present tense. Mm-hmm. So it is, you are in the immediacy of their frontal lobe. and you were seeing through their eyes, you're wearing their shoes. And so you start to become them when you sit down to write. And I can tell you my pulse, quickens when I'm writing harrowing scenes, not because it's great writing, but because I know what she's going through. I see it. I'm right there. And that's when you know that you've connected with the character. And then and then at that point, you're totally right. Then what they choose to do, it's almost visual, right? Like you can, oh, of course she's going to go walk to the door and open it, but of course she's going to look in the peephole first. You see it all like a movie, and that's when you know you're on a roll.
I know. I love that. I love that so much. And sometimes something comes to mind, to their mind, that you wouldn't have thought of if you weren't a writer in that particular situation. It's kind of the joy and terror of pantsing, as we are. And Judy says, it's great that you're a pantser. She's going to buy you. She's already ordered the book. Judy says, thank you, Judy. Very wise. We're both pantsers. That somehow our brains, and again, it's work and it's not always fun. I mean, it's like 50-50 fun. But when it is fun, our brains offer us something new.
Right.
You have that experience, right?
Totally. And that's the second question you ask yourself. So what would I do is the first question. The second question is what if? And that's where you're allowed to not be you. And sometimes you're writing something and then a character makes the decision that in your subconscious and your gut, you feel is maybe a little bit obvious. And then your brain starts thinking, well, what if she did this instead? And that might be a crazy suggestion and you immediately dismiss it. But sometimes those what ifs are like, oh, that's really interesting. That's not what I would do. But what if she chose to do this? What would that mean? And, I've killed off characters on what ifs, just like, well, what if this person just died right now? What would that mean? And sometimes you write it and it doesn't work and you delete it. Sometimes it just opens up an entirely new story. And that's the beauty of pantsing, as you know, is it gets you into a lot of trouble, but it's so exciting because you go off-roading and you're like, I'm in uncharted territory right now, but this is really cool.
Yeah. And what if this works? I mean, I love it. And when you think of a thing, and I hope you all are interested in this. I just love talking to Carter. He's such a genius. And this new book, Tell Me What You Did, is out in 2 weeks, but you can always pre-order. You know how important that me too is. Like when you have an idea and you think, oh my golly, what if they did that? Somehow, thank you, Shannon Hansen, somehow your brain can play out the whole story in like that amount of time, just in a split instant of a second. You can see what would happen throughout the book if she did this.
Right.
How would that end? Right. And how do our brains do that, do you think?
I honestly think it's decades of information being received by your subconscious coming out, right? You're not actively thinking about it, but you've set yourself up into a position where all those things that you've been writing lead up to. So when you and I are pantsing and we write a twist, it's not a twist we thought about, right? It's a twist that all of a sudden our subconscious says, everything's come to this point. Of course, this is what happens. I never would have figured that out were I consciously trying to think, what would be a good twist in this story? It all points to that direction. And then you can just see it all, but it's always been there. You just have finally tapped into it.
Sue Grafton used to call it the magic. And the more I encounter it, the more I think that she was right. And you cannot make it happen.
No, but when you read a book where it feels that it's been forced, it's very obvious, right? You're like, this feels very formulaic. This feels like they knew this the whole time. And some people do it great, but my brain doesn't work like that. I just need to trust that my subconscious will come to play at some point. And that's a big leap you have to take, but I don't know how else to do it.
It is a big leap because there are days when I think this isn't going to work anymore.
Right. Totally. Yeah. That 40 to 60% section of writing a book when you're just like this, I don't have enough words to make this last. Like what, this isn't interesting. I hate this. And then all of a sudden your brain starts saying, well, this is actually about this, this, and this. And you start to see the themes that you didn't know about the whole time. And then that becomes very invigorating.
I'm so reassured to hear this from you.
I hate everything I write at a certain point.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, it's interesting. Someone was saying when you discover the theme and we don't know it going in. When you discover the theme, it's like putting a drop of iodine in a glass of clear water. It just colors the whole thing. It colors the whole
Totally.
thing. What would you think are the themes of Tell Me What You Did? Family and trust?
Yeah, morality. It's at its heart, it's a revenge thriller, and I've
Mhm.
always been fascinated with revenge thrillers, and I think that's kind of something that we all play out in our minds, of course, and we never do anything about it because we're we're good people for the most part. Um, but I started thinking about, like, and I never approach a book like I'm going to write about this theme or I want this message to come across. I just want to see where the story goes. But I started thinking it's really about, like, well, what would you do? What would you do in a situation that you can get revenge and maybe get away with it? Are you the type of person who would do that? Does that actually help you at all? And I love the idea with Poe. It's like you seek this revenge and then you enact it, and then you're just as empty afterwards, but you don't know that until you go through it. So I just loved her exploration of just how do I heal, and trying to figure out how to heal and how to just get through life. And that's was her initial solution.
I love that. I think that's perfect. I think this is a book about healing. There's no question about it on many, many levels. And that's what makes this special, because it is quite suspenseful and quite a page turner, but it's a bigger book than that. It's a bigger book than about revenge. It is about healing and family and morality and grayness of decision making. A couple more questions, and then I want to go to you, audience, because I see a lot of questions. I see a lot of questions from you all. We love that. Thank you so much for asking questions. Oh, I forgot. It reminds me that but Carter is giving away a copy of Tell Me What You Did. I forgot about that.
A signed copy. Yep.
Oh, a signed copy.
I will ship it from this office right here.
So all you have to do to enter to win a signed copy shipped from Carter's very own office is to leave a question or a comment. You know this, or just general applause or adulation for Carter. Just wish him good luck. Oh, he doesn't really need that because this is awesome in his endeavors, and you will be entered to win a copy of the book. We'll spin the wheel of fun at the end of the show, and you will get a copy of this from Carter and his publisher, Source Books, Poisoned Pen. Such a fantastic publisher. There's some couple more things that I want to talk to you about very, very quickly. One is there's a situation that Poe is put in the book where she has to do a live podcast, not a taped podcast, but a live podcast, and talk about a tightrope when you go live to tens of thousands of people, as she does. And when you're live, you're not in control. What was it like? Why did you do it that way? And what do you think about live? Like, we're live right now.
Right.
Don't do anything, Carter.
I think it's totally stressful, and I've always been impressed that you do so many of your things live. My podcast is not live, so I can always, like, edit something out, although I rarely do. But it was the suspense of this person trying to get Poe to confess live, and of course her answer is to get drunk. She's a heavy drinker, and she thinks that's going to be an anesthetic for her, but of course that just tends to make your decision making all the much worse. I just love the idea that there's no, like you said, there's no safety net.
Yeah, and it's really tense. Betty Fellow says any book that Hank Phillippi Ryan raves about is guaranteed to be great. This is such a responsibility, Betty. Thank you for saying that. But I do think about that, and I know Carter does too. When you endorse a book, your name is on that book. I mean, I am just giving my total stamp of approval to this book, of course. It is a responsibility to your readers, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a responsibility to your friends who are asking you to read, and you want to be honest. And you and I both know, like, we've read some books where, like, this is a little tough. But most of the time I read a book and I'm like, I'm excited to help you make this big because this is a great book. But yeah, I take blurbs very seriously.
Betty, we will never let you down about this. The structure of this book, Carter, is gorgeous. It is wonderful. It is riveting. It is complex, but it is not complicated. It is seamless and easy to understand, but really well done. Can you tell us a little bit about the structure and why you decided to do it that way?
Yeah, there's a few different structures. It's mostly told from Poe's first person point of view, present tense. But this live interview that you alluded to, which takes place at the end of the book, I decided to take the transcript of that interview and kind of splice it throughout the pages of the book. So you're always kind of getting a sense that they're having this conversation, but you don't know what happens at the end of the conversation until you get to the end of the book. That was just a decision I made. I didn't know if it was going to work or not. And then the other thing I tend to do with my books is you always have this kind of event that explains why characters act the way they act, which took place in their past. And the easy thing to do is to kind of have some backstory to explain it. But that to me tends to bog things down a little bit. So I'd rather, hey, let's go back in time. And here's a first person present tense account of what happened that day. So there are some time shifts in the book as well.
Because what you did that I think is so brilliant is you make the past be now. You're in the now of the past, not
Right.
then or past tense. You're in the now. It's just another time.
Right.
And instead of being backstory, it's now story, or whatever you call the opposite of backstory. But it's so well done. Throughout the book, there are these QR codes, which I think is so fun. Now, you don't have to go to the link in the QR code. You can read the book without doing it. But if you do, you will get a huge surprise every time. Can you give anything about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. So Poe, when she's recording her podcast, she always deletes the video element as she promises her guests, but she actually always video records her side of the conversation just with a tripod and an iPhone. And I was writing these scenes and I'm like, I want to see what this looks like. And I reached out to an actress who had gotten to know a little bit and asked her if she would be willing to record some scenes for me. So she became my Poe. And so she's basically enacting the scene that you just read, and then it's packaged as recovered evidence, essentially. So when you get to that section of the book, it gives you a lot more. You can actually see Poe, see her emotions. And I can't say enough about Rebecca Kennedy, who did those scenes and has been in a lot of great films.
Yes, she was quite amazing. I didn't know what to expect. And someone is asking, was it Sherry? Sherry Steuben is asking, are the QR codes in the ebook?
Yes, they're in there as well. And I think you might just be able to touch them in the ebook and it'll go to the link.
Well, I didn't know what to expect. I'd never seen it in a book. I thought it was so incredibly clever, and it was really, really fun. And you did a great job producing those. I mean, they're realistic, and maybe they are real. Who knows? My final question is, and then we'll go to the audience, and then we'll spin the wheel of fun, because I know you all look at all of you who are here. Sue Street says that's a real great addition to the book. And Sharon Bishop says the enactments were a great addition. Yes, they were, Sharon. Hi. And Mary Garrett is saying, is there another way to access for Luddites who don't QR? Are there just links that you can use?
Probably just in the ebook, but it's just if you don't have a smartphone, then I'm not sure how you do it. So I apologize for that. But to your point, you can totally read the book and not miss anything. The only thing I did my acknowledgments as a video as well. So that's the only thing you might miss out on.
I did my acknowledgments. I read my acknowledgments for the audiobook.
That's awesome.
That was really fun.
That's great.
Really fun too. Anyway, my final question, and then we'll go to you all, is, as I've said, the tension in this book is really taut. I mean, it is propulsive and such a page turner and so well paced. How do you, asking for a friend, Carter, how do you do that? How do you think about suspense?
Well, my first draft is just whatever is coming out of my head, and I don't think about it. And it comes alive in the editing. And my editing process is mostly deleting words, because you get that sense, right? When you're reading your own work, it's almost a percussive element. You can almost hear the drum beats of the scene. And depending on the type of scene, you know how fast those drums need to be beating. And what I've learned over time is when I feel like the drums need to be beating faster, that's mostly achieved through deleting words. And I realize like, oh, this sentence is too bulky. It's taking away from that rhythm. So I just start deleting. Here are 4 words. How can I have one word that takes place of these 4 words, and distill it to its core? And so then the brain just absorbs that and almost doesn't even spend time with it. So you're just going and going and going. And I mean, that's kind of how I do it. It's very rhythmic when I'm kind of looking at my words.
So, I mean, that's music, isn't it? That's the
It
music.
is. It is to me, at least, because I do hear drums. Maybe I'm insane. But it's like metronomic, I guess, is maybe a better way of doing it. And just knowing that, like, okay, here's the part of the song that is going to be a little bit more stressful.
I mean, think about it. Think about the soundtrack of Jaws, you all, and that,
Right.
although it's a
Right.
tuba, I think, not drums. It's the same kind of suspense, and invokes the same kind of need to find out what happens next, with the foreboding of that you sort of predict that it's not going to be good. So, and that's why we read books like this. This is very marvelous. Tell Me What You Did by the fabulous Carter Wilson. I know we have so many questions from our fabulous audience. Deborah, I'm so glad you asked this. How did you begin writing thrillers? And if you did not write thrillers, what other genres would you write? Oh, 2 different questions. You were saying that you started writing when you were 30 and you didn't realize or think about that you'd ever be a writer. Can you tell us and Deborah a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was just taking a class one day, a continuing education class for this appraisal license I used to have. So an 8-hour long class. And I was so bored that I posed myself a riddle just on a piece of paper, and just a little murder mystery riddle came to my head. I don't know why. And so I started trying to answer this riddle and I couldn't figure it out. So when I got home, I kept writing about it and I locked myself away. And in 90 days, I had a 400-page manuscript, a terrible manuscript. But nothing like that had ever happened to me before. So I'm like, maybe this is something I should pay attention to. Maybe this is so I had to learn about writing, about the industry from scratch. And it was I did get an agent with that first book, but it never sold. But it was my agent who told me it was a thriller. And I'm like, great, what's a thriller?
Gotcha. That's an amazing and unique story. I don't think I've ever, I mean, that's a lightning bolt from above.
It was. Yeah. I always teach, listen to the universe when something happens, be curious about it because it might lead you in a totally different direction. I was a business major. I was been in, the real estate world, and I had no idea that I wanted to write a book.
That's brilliant. And also very inspirational for all of us. You never know what is around the next corner. And Deborah also wonders if you would write another genre.
I do have, genres are fluid and undefinable, as we all know. But I do have a YA thriller that's on submission right now that I co-wrote with a friend of mine. I do like YA quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, if I start thinking about something like romance, I just don't think I would be good at that. And I have such respect for people who like historical fiction's a great category that I have massive respect and appreciation. I'm like, I could not do all that research.
I know. Someone asked me once if I could write a romance novel without a mystery. And I said, I didn't really think about it. And I just sort of came out with, what would they do for 400,
Right.
400 pages?
Right.
It's like, yeah, maybe you don't want to write romance.
But it's just not who we are, because the people who do write romance are good at it and they know the answers to those questions. And I just don't think
and nobody
that's
needs
how my brain is built.
Nobody needs to get killed in their books. How do they?
Yeah. Where's the fun?
Anyway, do we have another question, Margaret? Was this always the title? Ooh, what a good question, Shannon Hansen.
That's a great question. Most of my titles are changed because they do get tested. And so the process is usually we give a lot of titles to the publisher. And I think the actual original title of this was Confess to Me, which is Tell Me What You Did is just a kind of a longer version of that. But it was determined to be, a better title. So that's never going to be a hill that I'm going to die on, because the title's always suggested to me. I'm almost always like, that sounds great. And this is, you all know what you're doing better than I do when it comes to, marketing and publishing a book. So yeah, most of my titles are changed.
I love Tell Me What You Did. I think it's more open-ended.
Yeah. That's a great, right. And it has a little bit of a less of a religious aspect than Confess to Me.
Exactly. Yeah. So you did the right thing. You totally did the right thing.
The right thing.
Kathy Lanigan. Hey, Kathy says Poe Webb is an interesting name. How did you come up with her name? Good one.
So Poe is her middle name. Her first name is Dylan, Dylan, but she goes by Poe, and that was given to her by her father, who was a massive fan of the works of Edgar Allan Poe. And it's, most people don't really know what gender Poe is for some time, because it's not easy to discern from her name. But I just love the name Poe.
I know that feeling, actually, about not being able to discern the gender with.
Right, exactly.
This has happened to me. Anyone else have a question, Margaret? I know they do. Did the book change from the ARC to the final copy? Oh yeah, I'd love to know what you did differently too. Thank you, Sherry.
Not from that stage. Usually once it's ARC, it's punctuation. But the big changes come when your editor, they buy the book and then they give you their editorial notes, which, as Hank knows is about 2 paragraphs of what we loved and about 16 single space type pages of maybe things you might want to consider. And they're always great suggestions. They're always things that make the book a lot better. But yeah, I will say Poe is in a relationship with her producer, Kip. And that's pretty pivotal to the story. And there's only a few characters in the story, but my original book, they were not dating. And so that was a pretty big overhaul. But that's probably the biggest thing that changed. But there's lots and lots and lots of little suggestions that you go through with your editor. And that's why you're so grateful to them, because they're all great.
Oh, that's so interesting. When you read this, you all, I know you'll agree with me that it's really difficult to imagine the book without that relationship. Because it really makes, talk about motivation, that makes a lot of difference. That raises the stakes.
And a lot of writers are very, they push back, right, on suggestions. And to me, when I finish my book, I know it's totally incomplete. It's the best that I can do at this point in my life. And I'm excited for the professionals in my life to say, what would make this better? And you realize, like, oh my goodness, I never would have come up with that on my own. And usually they don't tell you what to do, but they tell you how they received the book. And that lets you think about ways to make it better. So my books are always incomplete.
My editor is named, I love hearing this. You're always so reassuring. My editor is named Kristen. And when I send her my final draft of the first draft,
right,
which I know is going to be, I hope will be changed. I always say to her, I can't wait for this book to be Christianized.
Yeah, totally. That's just it.
And we're a team. We're a team.
Right.
And it really, she had me.
It's a lot of work, but it's exciting.
Oh, I know, but it's like a treasure hunt, isn't it? I mean, you get this jewel and you think, how can I make this work? And it's great. We're off-roading now again, you all. This is the talk of a pantser. 2 pantsers talking together. What's going to happen? It's going to be too long is what's going to happen. You all are so fantastic to be here. Carter, let's just spin the wheel of fun, you all, and see which of our lucky crime timers will win a copy. Look at all of you who are here. This is fantastic. Win a copy of Tell Me What You Did. And the winner is Brenda Gaskell. Yay, Brenda. That is great. Brenda is.
Congratulations, Brenda.
Yeah, that's great. She's a terrific veteran pal of Crime Time. So that is marvelous that she won. So you know how it works, Brenda. You're going to email me. I'll email our producer. Our producer will email Carter's publicist. Carter's publicist will email Carter, and then we'll get you the book. So that is the process of how it works. Congratulations. That is just great. Carter, this has gone by so quickly. Thank you for being incredibly marvelous.
Hey, thank you so much, Hank. Like I said at the top of the show, it's always fun talking to you and catching up and talking shop.
It is great. I agree with you. Thank you. And you all go to Carter's website and look at Carter's writing school and his podcast. Do not miss. Carter, tell us what your website is and what, again, about your school and about the podcast.
Yep, it's carterwilson.com, and my writing company is unboundwriter.com.
And listen, you heard all the little gems that Carter sprinkled through even our conversation. So imagine how wonderful it would be to have him as a teacher. I kind of rely on it, I have to say. So you all, next week at 4 p.m. ET, we will have Lori Dove, whose wonderful book is Mask of the Dear Woman. The cover you will just have to imagine, because I left the book upstairs and forgot to bring it down to show it to you. So you watch for the promo, or you go to any website from Lori Dove, Laurie, Dove, Dove, and look for Mask of the Dear Woman. It is gorgeous and compelling. I'm about halfway through, and it is unique and lovely and thought-provoking. Mask of the Dear Woman by Lori Dove. Next week, right here at 4 p.m. ET on Crime Time. Carter, thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity.
And we have loved being with you this afternoon. We will see you next time. And until then, remember, it is always safe inside a book. Love you.